Welcome to the Passive House podcast, brought to you by Passive House Accelerator, a catalyst for zero carbon building. For news, inspiration, and connections from all flavors of Passive House, check out passivehouseaccelerator.com. Sign up to receive regular updates about events, get your technical questions answered, and contribute to the community forum. There's loads of free information for experienced professionals and people just starting out on their Passive House journey. We hope to see you at one of our construction, tech, or weekly Global Passive House Showcase webinars. In the meantime, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Well, welcome to episode 100 of the Passive House Accelerator podcast, Passive House podcast. And welcome back, Zack, from your holiday, COVID and all. I hope you're feeling okay.
I am. It was a great adventure, and I've been eluding COVID for a long time, so my name came up. I'm doing fine.
And we've got Mary with us today as well. Thanks for joining us on this special episode, Mary.
Exciting to be here.
And one other very special guest today, Michael Ingui. Welcome.
Thanks. Nice to be here.
Well, we're going to get into a bit more about your story because your name does crop up, rightly so, quite often. But this is a great opportunity to have you finally on the podcast. It's only taken us, I think, 100 episodes to get you.
Well, he was on the first one. He was on the first one, but that was 100 ago.
Yeah, that counts.
Yeah, true. Well, it's great to have you back, and we've got today a slightly different format. We're just going to have a bit of a chat and talk about some highlights and kind of just reflect on all the stuff that you, our audience, have been up to, and all the great guests and great trends that have been happening out there. So it's a bit of a celebration at a time to kind of think about where we're at in this world of Passive House. So looking forward to getting to that. But before we do, let's thank our awesome sponsors, Zack.
Absolutely. So everything we do at Passive House Accelerator, including the Passive House podcast, comes to us. Thank you to generous support from our sponsors. So our founding sponsors are 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingui Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minutair All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. Our champion sponsors are Icon Windows and Doors and Proseco, and our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So a big thank you to our sponsors.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to start with you, Michael, and then turn the tables. But before we get into that, let's have a look back at where this all came about. As you rightly pointed out, you did join us for the first episode. But just remind us, where did the Passive House Accelerator come from?
Yeah, so the accelerator was something I wanted to do early on, about 8 years ago or 7 years ago. I'd been doing passive houses for about 2 or 3 years at that point. It's about a decade now. But I was going to a whole bunch of conferences, seeing all this great information being shared at individual conferences, and was having a hard time sharing it broadly, and really wanted to create a situation where people could do that. At the same time, we were learning how to do passive house retrofits, and I'll talk about our firm in a bit, but we were doing passive house retrofits and learning how to share it amongst our own builders and so forth. And found that people love to share information and share stories. So the Passive House Accelerator was originally created where it could combine all the efforts of all the different groups who are already having conferences and already sharing information, to put it in one place where everybody could find it. So the hurdle would be that much lower. And it was a lot of fun. It was great to do it. I was happy I started it. It's not what I do. I like designing. I like painting. I like being an architect. But I was horrible at doing this, and but it was still fun. And the bar was low. Everybody was jumping on. I was a little afraid to do it at first, but everybody was really excited. But it obviously wasn't what I do. And then Zack joined. I still remember when I realized Zack was available. I called him instantly, and you very quickly find out just how good it could be. So Zack's like, no, you do this and that, and from there it grew to where it was when Mary joined, and it's been a snowball. I mean, that's a quick answer, but it's been a fun snowball.
Yeah, I did. What did you get up to first, Zack? What was your first involvement?
The first involvement with the accelerator?
Yeah.
So I was, at the time, I was doing marketing work at Zola Windows. And so I think, and then I was also involved with Passive House Northwest. I think I was doing some advocacy work with them and another organization in Seattle called Shift Zero. So I think my first involvement was writing an article, turning a piece that I had presented at Passive House Northwest into an article that then Michael published on the Accelerator website. It was about kind of passive house policy and climate action and that kind of thing. And I was really fascinated by the Accelerator and the concept of just, this ecumenical place for all sorts of people from, whether it was PHI or FIAS, sort of, people who are doing practice in either of those standards or both of those standards, or just people who are involved or interested in building decarbonization, coming together in one place to share ideas. Like that just really was an exciting concept to me. So when I say I don't, and it's been there's been some water under the bridge since those first days, but I was definitely really keen about being a contributing writer potentially to the accelerator in those early months.
And Mary, I remember you coming on board I think of you as a writer as well, because I think you were already producing the magazine prior to being in the accelerator.
Mm-hmm. I had a magazine, Passive House Buildings, that I started. I had done a bunch of regional books about passive house projects in each of the regions where Passive House was active across North America. And there were projects that didn't fit into any of those regional guides. So I started creating the magazine, Passive House Buildings, and that has flowed into the Passive House Accelerator magazine.
Yeah, and it's really nice to have that format alongside the videos and this podcast and everything else as well. And I think really people appreciate that. Michael, come back to you. Let's go back even further. Baxt Ingui didn't start out as a passive house practice, did it?
No, yeah, it's funny as I'm kind of listening to both Zack and Mary, and you, Matthew. I'm realizing just how lucky I am to be around people who like to collaborate, and it really does start with when I started to work with Ben Baxt way back when, and I worked for Ben early on. I was going to stay a year. It's what you do in architecture. You work somewhere for a year or two, get some valuable experience, and you jump. And the way Ben had set up the firm is you basically can work to whatever ability you have. And everybody in the office collaborated. And it was kind of a fun atmosphere. And there was a lot of opportunity in one place. And they were doing a lot of fun design work as well as implementation. They were involved the whole way through, which is something I was quite interested in. I like the tactile quality of design and really getting in there with the contractors. And Baxt, I think we still work that way the whole way through. And we built a practice. I think we're 25 people now. And everyone from, someone who just comes to work there from the beginning to working there, some people have been with us for more than 20 years. Everybody gets to work to their tallest, highest ability. There's no ceiling. There's no guardrails. So you really get to do what you want to do there, which is really fun. And it's highly collaborative. Ben has always really been pushing for environmental work. He's done some passive solar. He's done a lot of work. And in fact, I would say he's been a pretty significant influence in that. What happened was we were doing a townhouse in Brooklyn next to Sam McAfee and Ken Levinson. Ken was the architect, now owns 475 and is with Passive House Network. And Sam McAfee, who's now with Zola, was the contractor. And I was doing a typical house, and my typical house had all this air conditioning, all this heating, and all these fantastic systems that made everything work seamlessly together that cost a lot of money. And it was incredible. It was fun. It was wonderful. But then I saw their project next to me, and it had one little baby air conditioner, no boiler, none of those bells and whistles. And I made fun of Sam for like 2 years. It was fun to make fun of him because, he would take it and then show me stuff, take it and then show me stuff and then teach me stuff. And, honestly, it just felt like it would never work. I mean, how can I have all this stuff and he didn't? And it not only worked, but it worked really well. And we hired Sam after that for help as a consultant on a number of other projects. Our first Passive House was about a decade ago. It was LEED Platinum. The LEED Platinum cost a lot of money. Passive saved a lot of money. It was quite interesting. And some of it was experiential. We were learning as we were going. But we were sold. It was fun. On that project, though, we learned some valuable lessons. The client was happy, and the client, who's actually since been a major advocate and supporter in a lot of endeavors I've been in, that project was the way that project went was pretty horrible. It took forever to finish that house, but that client was in. That client wanted to do it, and we learned that it was never scalable for us or anyone else, and we were pretty bummed because we loved doing it. And so we realized we needed to create a repeatable approach to doing a historic masonry retrofit. So just a little background on these. These are landmark buildings in New York City on blocks and in districts where people don't necessarily care as much about the environmental factors as much as they do the historic factors. And they need a lot of work. These buildings are chopped up into lots of pieces. So we've got a lot against us. Everything's got to be in the inside. And at the time, we didn't have a lot of clients who really wanted passive. So they're also walking into this house and you can't even tell it's passive. So there's a lot of work to get it there, but the process was really horrible. So we spent the next 2 or 3 projects, and we still are, by the way, we're kind of infatuated with it, creating this repeatable approach, this systematic approach to doing a passive house, especially in a historic masonry retrofit. And Sam was really helpful with that. We've got so many others who have been helpful with it. And Kevin Brennan, who's been on the accelerator, Ed May, Kramer, Silkworth. They've all been just instrumental in making this happen and knowing what to do first, what to do second, what to do third. And the next projects were just exponentially better. One of the ways we got there was that we requested that our contractors start to meet together. And this is a copyable item that everybody should do, regardless of where they're doing work. We, after that first project, we invited people, and even in that first project, when we realized what we should have done, that contractor, who we do a lot of work with now and has done a lot of passive houses, invited people in, people he competed with, people who lost out on that job, people who had known of each other but never met each other, competing contractors in one place.
Right.
And the thought was that if I wanted to scale this in my world, I really wanted to do it with the contractors I loved working with. And I thought they could because they were great artisans. And they were in. The first meeting was kind of weird. They didn't want to come in. They were kind of milling around outside. And then the first meeting was
because they're not used to having a session like that with all their competitors.
God, no. They didn't want to talk to them at all. And it was awkward. And then the first part of that meeting, it was about 10 contractors at that time. And then me and a few other people were there. Amy Fiala from our office and Frankie Fiala and a few others were there, kind of really, Will Connor, kind of helping out, making that session maybe a little bit more fun. Eventually, the contractors, though, started to share some knowledge, and all of a sudden the iPhone's out and they're showing pictures, and all of a sudden they're realizing that someone's actually describing a problem they're having and a solution. That meeting went for an hour and a half, and it was fun. Second meeting was about 20 contractors. It went for about 2.5 hours. They requested that it happen later in the day for the next one. so they could all go out for happy hour. The next one was about 50 people. They were starting to bring all the people that work with them on it. Other engineers, other architects I competed with started to come. The next one we had to break into 2 sessions. It was almost 100, and they're just fantastic. They're fantastic sessions where, and basically we do it right after the initial blower door, where you can still see some problems, and it's gotten to a point where people are excited about describing the problems and the solutions. We've got contractors sharing this on a group chat. We've got contractors sharing workers now, which is weird. Blower doors, other tools, other services. It's a pretty wild experience. We've got contractors coming to us who just want to do passive, just so they can be invited to these things. It's really been fun, and that's also one of the precursors to the accelerator. How do we make this happen on a broader scale? That plus, I would go to these different conferences and talk about what I'm describing now, and I'd just be blown away at what I didn't know. And I'm like, I cannot believe I didn't know that obviously incredible thing. And I came back and I shared it with all those people. And, you just, again, you meet these people at these conferences, and they're just so knowledgeable in Spain and in Germany and in China and all these different places that I was lucky enough to go. And really that's when I was like, all right, time's up. No, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to jump in. And it was going to be a group blog or something, but that's kind of the longer version of how we got to the accelerator.
Well, and then I guess we have to remind people that this was all when people were still working in the offices and not spending so much time online. So bringing something online was a bit different.
So true.
I remember turning up to what is now Passive House Live, and it being like any highlight keynote at a Passive House conference that I'd been to, with great presentation, but with the added bonus of so much conversation going on during the presentation, and then lots of Q&A, lots of engagement, detailed engagement afterwards. And for me, it was around the middle, 11 a.m. Midday. So I sort of eventually had to go back to work, but people just carried on. Some of those sessions go for 2 hours.
Oh yeah, I've seen that was incredibly exciting. It's one of the things that I love about the accelerator. We've run it very similar to the way the office is run, where someone comes up with a great idea. This podcast is a good example of that, Matthew. They said, "Hey, let's do a podcast," and then you guys just did it. Same thing with the happy hour, which is what it was called at the time. It's a showcase now. Sean Sanamore and Monty Paulson called us, and they're like, "Listen, we were doing these things in person because of COVID. We couldn't. We're doing them on Zoom. I think we can get some more people. Do you want to do it with us?" And we're like, yeah. And then the next week we just did it. And didn't announce it. Didn't do anything special. And there were a lot of people, and it was fun. And you're right. I mean, it was wonderful through COVID. And there were times when we had 200 or 300 people on, and it's a 15-minute session. And I like the way it's been set up, where it's a project. You have to describe how you did it and share your details. And then, it's a quick 15-minute presentation. It's supposed to be a 15-20-minute quick Q&A. And then there's the after hour, which people can stay for or not. But I just remember, and Zach, I'm so horrible with names, the hot water seminar with Gary.
Gary Klein. Yep.
Yeah, Gary Klein. I went for 2.5 hours. It was so over my head. I'm hanging on for dear life, just trying to learn anything. But you had people from all over the world who learned that Gary was going to be on, and they were getting into the weeds. But I can tell you right now, my hot water heater spec and the way I pipe it and the way we insulate it and the location has changed since Gary's presentation. And awesome. So, I was hanging on for dear life, but I think he's able to affect change on kind of a global level. People are on from all over the place. So that was fun. And I would say it's been great. It's been great to have that.
When you were telling that kind of inspiring story of Passive House practice and collaboration with in the community building that you've been doing, the house of Representatives officially passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which means that, passed the Senate, it miraculously 50-50, and now it passed the House. And so President Biden will sign it, which is like the first real climate legislation that's coming out of the federal government in the United States. And that means, the best estimates are that will bring our emissions in the US down to 40% lower than 2005 levels. So almost 50% lower by 2030, which is in line with what they call the carbon law, right? Which is we need to slash emissions by 50% every decade. So I just want to say that's incredibly exciting. And that means that things like, Massachusetts just signed a big, massive new piece of climate legislation. The work that we do to reduce emissions in buildings, like we're going to be able to get to 50% by 2030 in the United States. And that is kind of amazing. So I just wanted to mark that moment.
So significant.
Do you think they've been listening in, Zack, to we can take some credit for that?
I think so. I think that I feel like we can take some credit. Definitely. Yeah, I think that they've been listening to the podcast. I mean, there are a lot of listeners. We don't know who they are. Sure I suspect that a lot of them are legislators in DC. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we definitely need to do the pivot to Mary. I'm sorry to interrupt there, but I'm super excited, and this is a big moment for us in the U.S.
So I was going to say that I remember when Mary and I first talked about having Mary kind of jump into the accelerator, and I've been reading Passive Buildings magazine and keeping them on my desk because, again, they're set up that way. They're set up with projects. You can learn it. And one of the kind of exciting things about going to the Passive House conferences is having the books and the magazine there. And some of the best things that we've done on the accelerator have been some of these incredible summits and some of these other items that have been super difficult to put together and pull off. And now we've got the magazine as well, which has also been just fantastic and exciting. So it's been a lot of fun. It's addictive. It's fun to be around. And again, Matthew, for the record, I shouldn't say this because I'm on a podcast right now, but before the Passive House Accelerator podcast, I'd never listened to a podcast. And, but now I do, because I realized I actually like it. It's kind of cool when you're driving or if you're in the subway, if you downloaded it. And I listen to a lot of people's podcasts, but this is so much fun.
Yeah, there's some cool ones, isn't it?
You could write stuff down while you're listening. So it's so much fun. So again, I feel like what's good about the accelerator, and I think that'll continue in the coming year, is we just keep getting to do some more stuff and collaborate. And
I mean, I learn so much listening, because I get since the raw interviews that Zack had done, and particularly Mary and Ilka, some of the amazing women that you've found and interviewed, just some really inspiring stories. I tend to, just the way my routine works, I tend to listen to those early in the morning prior to catching up with you guys, and it's just such a great start to the day. There's a lot of young women, women from various backgrounds that just have these amazing stories often it's about people as well. It really often comes back to the people that they are working to create better places for. And that's not an exclusive thing to your interviews at all, but there's just been some amazing stories that have been very inspiring, and lots of retrofit stuff as well, that those stories have picked up, particularly recently. Some pretty amazing stuff going on. So it's been a privilege for me to listen to those and get to share those stories.
Well, on that, I do have a question for you guys. There have been some really incredible podcasts. Any favorite podcasts? Any favorite moments that stick out? I mean, there's 100 of them, so sorry to put you on the spot. But I mean, there's been so many interesting moments. But do any of you guys have any key items that come to your mind right away?
Well, I've got if I start off, I've got a few here. One particular woman who stood out for me is Prudence, actually, which Prudence has been involved right from the start. And I've heard her speak, but then when we got to interview her about her work, and I remember being very excited about the things that she was thinking about already around the use of AI and using technology to speed up the design process, which just blew my mind. Just thought, because I think a lot of people get into Passive House and know that it's leading edge, but then find that a lot of the grunt work is done or has been done by a pretty dated Excel spreadsheet. So to have very clever people like Prudence and the people that she hangs out with starting to think about how to use really smart technology to speed up that design process for better outcomes for people, and also incorporating carbon and doing some really amazing life cycle analysis as part of the decision-making process. That was a bit of a highlight to me, and one that I'd like to keep looping back to see where progress goes. One other that I'd mention would be Robin Walk. She's actually been on the show twice, and she's from BC Hydro, but she came in and spoke about the energy step code. I push that concept of an energy code roadmap that gives a clear direction of where things are heading from a policy point of view every opportunity that I get, because we've been very reactive with our changes to building code upgrades here in New Zealand and also Australia. And having that roadmap kind of approach just makes so much sense for the whole industry. And the success of what they've done in Vancouver and then spreading out to British Columbia, and the influence that other people are starting to pick up on that concept. Effectively leading industries to approaching very close to or using effectively Passive House metrics to drastically reduce their emissions, energy consumption, but also improve the health and performance of buildings over a discrete period of time is very cool. That's two from me. I've got more, but I'll let Zack and Mary.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are two good ones. Well, one theme that has come up a lot in the podcast, and we've commented on it, so it may not be new to listeners, but the impact of the Great Recession on uptake of Passive House practice has been really surprising. And I was introduced to Passive House during that time. A lot of people during the Great Recession, which as we all know, hit architects really hard. A lot of people kind of, took a step back and really thought about what was important to them, and realized they were at a time where they, maybe needed to retool or, do something different. And that, I think, was the beginning of a lot of people's Passive House careers. So it's been fun to hear all these the different ways that that's borne out. The other thing,
it gets mentioned in so many origin stories. Mentioned around 2008, 2009.
Right.
And then they kind of emerge.
Yeah. And in North America, that coincides with kind of the emergence of Passive House. And one of the, like in the Northwest, there was a time Katrin Klingenberg did a presentation at the library here in Seattle. Like there's also the timing was serendipitous. But anyway, that's been powerful. The other thing that has come through, and this is, I think, top of mind, because I just did an interview with Richard Yancey, the executive director of Building Energy Exchange, which will air in a week. But it reminded me of this thing this story that we hear a lot, which is how interconnected all this is. So it's partly getting back to your point, Matthew, about the step code and telling that story and bringing that example. But he was talking about, so what I didn't realize was that Richard Yancey, who's based now in New York with Building Energy Exchange, was an architect in Seattle for a long time, and he was introduced to high performance building here. There's a really kind of innovative teaching center that's been around for a long time, connected to the University of Washington. So that's where he kind of got his start in high performance building. Much, it was really cutting edge at that time. This is in the 90s, and then moved back to New York and got connected with Bloomberg and started the Building Energy Exchange. But that became like there's this connection to this community that has now, it is doing the Living Building Challenge, but now is, he's there in New York doing the BEX and taking examples of kind of the lighting design, technical assistance that we're doing in Seattle and applying it there, which is cool. But then also he went to Brussels in 2015, and there's the whole Brussels story, which we've heard, I think, many times, and how powerful that story of starting with exemplary buildings to show proof of concept and to build up kind of practice and awareness and comfort with Passive House in Brussels, and then it became code, and how that story in 2015, and how that story and example became really pivotal to bringing Passive House into kind of the center of policymaking in New York City and also in Vancouver, BC. And then that Vancouver, BC example helps become the step code, which then becomes an example for you in New Zealand. And so there are all these cool interconnections and ways that we overlap with one another and can support one another at different times in our careers or in different places and different centers of kind of thought that are kind of coalescing into this movement that we're seeing and the exponential growth that's happening in building.
Yeah, I mean, the interconnectedness of everybody's influences. I mean, that's in a way what the accelerator is trying to promote, right? Is foster that community building so that people can learn from each other. And but back to the podcast. I mean, I hadn't done any podcast before I started the accelerator. I've been doing magazines forever, but so it's been really fun. And one of the things I love about it, not specific podcasts so much as the chance to talk with people about more of their personal thoughts about climate change or about building performance and their career influences. I just love that because in magazine articles, of course, you're focused on a particular case study or a particular technology that you're exploring. And I love getting the bigger picture from people. So that's been really fun. And
was it the one of the most recent ones you did, I think, Mary, where your guest said that they knew they wanted to be an architect from like age 7 or something?
Yeah, I wasn't quite that young, but yeah, she had a school project where that's
right. Yeah.
The teacher asked them to give themselves an award for, their future
career. Yeah.
Gave herself the best architect award. And one of the things I loved about her too is that particular podcast was that, I asked her, as I often ask, have you felt any that you were treated any differently for being a woman? Because she actually ended up being more of an engineer. She has an architecture degree, but she's went off to specialize in building enclosures. And she was like, not really. I mean, yeah, we were in the minority in my class, but not so much. And I love seeing the different answers to that question, depending on the age a little bit of the woman that I'm talking to. So that's exciting. And I love hearing about people's really early career influences. A lot of times for women, did they get a chance to experience hammering and putting things together,
Yeah.
Because that seems to be a thread that shows up. So that's fun.
I really like hearing people's first time they got to work on a Passive House project, and often that's driven by a client or some other circumstance, or that they've tried, but it's not until things sort of all align when a firm or somebody gets to work on one. But then once you've got the first one, I don't know if this has been your experience, Michael, but you get the first one and start promoting it, and then everyone wants one.
Yeah, no, I think that's happening. I mean, New York is really on fire right now in terms of, oh, it's very hot here.
Not literally.
It's
California.
But it is pretty hot here. But no, it just everyone it once you do one and people come in, they can't unlearn it. They can't unsee it. So once they experience it, like, well, how can I have this? I mean, very often I've mentioned this before, and people have heard me say, I feel I'll when I meet with new potential clients, I don't really mention Passive House very much. And I usually walk them through and I say, listen, if you want a house that is free of most bugs and dust, we could probably do a Passive House. And if you want to have a house that has filtered fresh air 24/7, we could probably do a Passive House. And if we do a Passive House, you'll reduce almost all that street noise. And it makes a really healthy, indoor, serene environment. And I start to get into the energy efficient aspects of it, but I'm almost cut off instantly. What's Passive House? How do I have that thing? And they're sold.
Yeah,
they're in.
They
want it more.
bugs and dust.
They don't want. They didn't know they could. Nobody knew to ask the question. So that's a very interesting thing, by the way. I mean, I think that's where we are, and I think it's what we have to remind ourselves of. We have a crystal ball.
Yeah.
I mean, we see it. We're not wondering what the future looks like, and we're not wondering how to get there. We've got a massive problem of climate change right now, and we've had lots of problems in this universe before, but very often we didn't know what the answer is. But in the built environment, we really know what the answer is. It's crazy to know it, and whether it's a podcast or some of the other items, to share that broadly and then have people learn it. People don't know to ask the question. They didn't know, can I have filtered fresh air? They didn't know to ask, can I have a sealed home? They just kind of assumed, no, I'll take the house with all the bugs. Nobody wants that. But it's pretty amazing. We're in an emerging market that happens to be great for the environment, and we do have a crystal ball. Looking at the podcast and looking at some of the other lives that we've all done, I mean, the projects on there are a crystal ball. I mean, you could take a look at it and you could say, okay, that's my answer. I'm doing that on my next project. And it's pretty wild to have that in any other industry. If you had a crystal ball into the future, you'd be all over that. People would be investing all over that. And I think that is only now starting to happen with zero carbon buildings and passive houses.
Yeah. And even on a individual project level, you got a crystal ball, because with the tools available, the energy modeling, from what I've seen, is pretty good at predicting actual performance.
I've described it,
which is not always the case for energy modeling.
Oh no, it de-risks for the first time in architects and engineers' world. I mean, I did I really get the thermal bridge right? I mean, you think you did, but having it run through the planning packages, that's huge. It's pretty amazing. You're right, Matthew.
Anyway, we don't want to geek out too much on thermal bridges and FRSI values right now, but save that for another time. I want to say thank you to you, Michael, for making this all happen right from the start, because we sort of had inklings of the things, and we were sort of, I guess, we're a good representation of the industry. People busy in their own little space doing their own thing, but it takes people like you to realize the value of that collaboration, bring everything together, and create that space for people to do that. And I know that you have been very active, albeit behind the scenes, for a lot of people who don't always get to hear your voice and or hear directly from you. But I certainly really appreciate the platform that you've created space for.
And thank you guys. You've been incredible collaborators and leaders. And so thank you.
Any other thoughts from Zack, Mary, about the first 100?
I mean, I can't believe it's been 100, and then we have all those bonus episodes too.
Yeah, you snuck in a whole bunch of other.
So if you add them all up, and then the component podcast, the component episodes, which have been really fun. So we're already at 150, which is great. Yeah. If you count all those, it's amazing.
You whipped out the microphone at a couple of events that you in-person events.
Yeah, right. And then Mary and Sean did at the in Canada recently, and yeah, it's been a lot of I'm just grateful that we have listeners who are tuning in and engaging, and encourage folks, if you have comments or feedback, advice, ideas for episodes, please let us know at podcast@passivehouseaccelerator.com. We'd love that input and guidance for sure.
Awesome. All right. Anything else from you, Mary?
No, it's just been a great experience, and it's exciting to see the community growing larger.
Yeah, I also want to thank Mary and Michael and Matthew. You guys are, it's a total honor to work with the three of you and the rest of the Accelerator team. But this confluence of talents and expertise in these different areas of podcast, magazine, and Passive House is just a real privilege. So thank you.
And a couple other people we should thank are our editors as well. We've had Sydney helped out for a long time, and other team. It makes. I do some other podcasting and which I edit, and it takes a long time to do that, and it can be quite thankless. So I definitely appreciate just being able to talk to you guys and then just close my computer and walk away.
Yeah, so, Sydney does a great job.
Really appreciate all the technical stuff, the editing, the production, and uploading, and everything that goes on behind the scenes.
And Ilka Cassidy too for helping out on all my podcasts.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah,
no kidding.
Yeah, awesome. All right, hey, well, here's to another 100. But
Cheers.
In the meantime, we also have a bunch of other stuff going on. Zach, we haven't done announcements for a little while you've been on holiday, but you got some items coming up.
Yes, indeed. So August, we are taking off for our live events, but we start back up on September 7th. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be this is Building Energy NYC 2022 conference preview. So we have some really great content gleaned from that event that we're going to be presenting on September 7th. And then there are also, we have the FIASCon conference coming up and other big events happening in the fall. So we'll have links to that information in show notes. We also want to announce that the Building Energy Exchange is hosting the Passive House Summer School. So now through the end of August, you can take a range of courses on Passive House design for free. So you visit their events calendar for upcoming live deliveries at be-exchange.org, and we'll include that in the show notes, or take any course on demand for free with the coupon code PHSummer until August 31st. So it's a chance to get your feet wet with Passive House design at be-exchange.org, now with a new Passive House construction primer tailored for contractors and tradespeople as well.
And also, did you hear that there's a call out for abstracts for the International Passive House Conference?
You did. They're due September 2nd.
Awesome. And that's a good reminder to get stuck into that if you want to attend or be heard at that event next year. I think
it'll be a good one.
Yeah, it should be a good one. Awesome. Is that it? That's a wrap for this week. Thank you again, Zach. Thanks, Mary, and thanks, Michael. And we're back again next week, I think.
Thanks, Matthew.
Great.
Thank you. Happy 100.
Woo-hoo.